Hello, everyone, and welcome. Very happy to have you here. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today. With me, we have Yaniv Bar-Dayan, co-founder and CEO, and Tom Morgenstern, co-founder and CPO. Guys, take it away.
Thank you, Asaf. Thank you for planning this. Thank you, everyone, for coming to listen a bit about how we perceive the challenges, the modern challenges of the vulnerability management space, and how we can allow or think enterprises to start thinking about this space more in terms of remediation rather than in terms of just assessment and prioritization. In this webinar, what we're going to do is we're going to start talking about how we see the challenges of vulnerability management over the years and what are the changes that we see now that created this blast of change around this market. Then we're going to talk a bit about 2019 and what is unique about the problems in the 2019 enterprise and the way that it manages vulnerabilities. We're going to talk a bit about the concept of remediation campaigns and remediation strategies and what are the recommended remediation strategies and way of thinking of these problems around how we remediate more vulnerabilities, more misconfigurations, more cyber hygiene-oriented issues in our environments. Then we're going to talk a bit about legacy solutions versus the modern approach that we come to present. Eventually, we'll do a short demo of what Vulcan can do and open it for Q&A. So first, what we need to understand is that the enterprise of 2019 is very different than the enterprise 10 years ago. There are four main things that have changed. One is that we're not looking at desktops and single on-prem data centers anymore. We're looking at laptops, we're looking at data centers that are spread all around the world, both hosted and maintained by the enterprise, but also, of course, in the public cloud. AWS, Azure, GCP, Alibaba, and more are starting to get to a point where they are becoming the majority of the hosting of servers around the world. And this, of course, impacts the way that we perceive security, the way that we manage the hygiene over different environments, from vulnerabilities down to configurations. With that, there are new practices that are being presented that allows us as security professionals, as IT professionals, as DevOps engineers, R&D, and so on, to maintain and to update our infrastructure and our applications. Things could become more automatic, and it already is on the business side. Development of new applications, releasing new features is something that is becoming more automated. While the business side enjoys it, security are still lagging behind in using these capabilities for their benefit. Another issue that is very important for us to consider is how our data centers are working today. If the data center 15 years ago focused on maintaining an Exchange email server for the enterprise users to use, or having a file system that allows users in the enterprise to move files from one site to another, today we consume these services through service providers, Office 365, G Suite, and so on, while our data center is becoming more oriented towards production, towards running business-critical applications that either serve directly the customers of the business or are part of the overall business operations. Think about it. The word production comes out of production lines in a factory. If we harm them, if they stop, we start losing money. And therefore, today, as we treat our data centers, we have to think all the time that our data centers are a crucial and inherent part of our business, and they serve our customers, and therefore, on the one hand, they have to be up and running always. And on the other side, eventually we have to make sure and take under account that the data and the things that these production environments are doing are way more important than before. This, combined with the fact that software and tools are more diverse, it's not only that we have to maintain Microsoft products anymore or Oracle products anymore. We have more than 1,000 applications in average for the average enterprise in the United States that are running. Parts of them, or almost 30% of them, are open source. And this requires another level of the way that we manage our software, the update, the patches, the changes that allows us to eventually keep our hygiene clear. This is a huge challenge and a huge change that traditional tools had yet to adapt to. And this combines with the fact that the threat landscape is becoming even tougher. If we look at how many vulnerabilities are being disclosed, for that matter, we see that 2017 and 2018 are years where almost or record-breaking years in terms of vulnerability disclosure. If you count down the number of vulnerabilities in 2015 and 2016 and compare them to 2017, 2018, you see that we are actually facing 3 times more, almost 32,000 out of those almost 9,000 criticals versus almost 12,000 with 4,000 criticals. This, combining with the fact that the average time to exploit starting from 2017 had dropped also significantly from 30 days in average to almost 7 days, means that if we do simple math, we have to work 3 times harder and 3 times faster, not to be better than what we were 5 years ago, but actually just keep just the same, which is of course not enough. And we have plenty of examples where unpatched vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, things that we knew of had led to, of course, very severe breaches. The crazy thing is that with all of that, the resources that are being invested in this process of remediating vulnerabilities are becoming unsustainable. We're talking about 321 hours a week. This is 8 different people a week handling the vulnerability remediation cycle from top to bottom, from people on the security side, like the director or lead of vulnerability management, down to security engineers who are working with IT people, R&D people, and DevOps people. And this is only an average. The larger the organization gets, the more complicated it is. There are different product lines, different business lines, different services that are being managed by different teams. And this requires a different way to look at things. We, as security practitioners, cannot delegate and forget. We have to provide our counterparts with effective tools and effective strategies that will allow them to effectively remediate vulnerabilities. Because eventually, in the end of the day, if we are being breached, it's not them that are on the line. It's us, the security professionals who are running these strategies or running these programs, and have to allow and empower our counterparts to be productive in the way they resolve the problems that we foresee and transmit to them. With that, as we take a strategy towards how we manage our vulnerabilities in the enterprise, we have to talk about 2 things. One is remediation strategies, which are the methodologies that leads to the execution of effective remediation campaigns across the enterprise. When we see different strategies compiled, we usually look at 3 different strategies that are being implemented all together within one enterprise environment. The first strategy is what we call vulnerability-driven campaigns. These are campaigns that are meant to remediate one unique vulnerability across the entire enterprise environment. Usually, this happens when there is a significant event or significant epidemic like WannaCry and Petya, a very specific vulnerability in the news like Bluekeep, that because of its severity, for one, but also sometimes, which is very natural, pressure from the board, things that are out of our control in terms of what kind of things we are requested as security people to do, will lead us to get into this war room situation and try to remediate a vulnerability across the stack. This means that we have to define which assets are vulnerable, what are the windows we can patch. We're probably going to do it gradually, and we'll try to change things in our infrastructure from patching down to doing other stuff like using our compensating control, configurations, and so on across the enterprise in order to remediate a vulnerability. The second type of strategy is what we call policy-driven campaigns. This is usually comes with relations to a specific type of environment or a specific relations to a compliance or a business. So one option or one thing that you probably will be familiar with is PCI. We have our PCI environments everywhere where we process credit card, process other payments. Same goes for PIIs in terms of GDPR. These are environments that needs to meet certain regulations. For example, PCI could not have critical vulnerabilities up to a certain SLA. And these things are continuous. Unlike vulnerability-driven campaigns, well, once they are over, they are over. In terms of policy-driven campaigns, we have to make sure that our organization continuously keep on acting. And usually these campaigns are very repetitive and mundane. We have to open the tickets on the same people. We have to bind them to the same SLAs. We have to provide them with the same patches to the same software usually. These things could be more automated and could be defined as policies and rules that are being driven from security to your counterparts. PCI, on the one hand, another very good example is external facing assets. We could say that as a policy, every external-facing server in our production environment could not be exposed to remote code execution vulnerabilities. And then define a policy that will either auto-patch or put a very short SLA, or even prevent from these type of services to go up live once they have these vulnerabilities in them. The way that you act is on you, but the policy and the campaigns keep on going continuously. The last type of strategy is what we call product-driven campaigns. And these are things that are usually very wide, are kind of long-term projects, but can give lots of benefits. One example is going and seeing that you have 1,000 different applications, servers, that are running Red Hat 5. And you see that Red Hat 5 is vulnerable to 2,000 different vulnerabilities. And if you will update Red Hat 5 to Red Hat 7, then you'll probably know and see that all these 1,000 vulnerabilities will be remediated on 1,000 different critical servers in your environment. This remediation campaign usually requires more effort, but the benefit, especially in large environments, is enormous. You can do one app, one time, test it one time on the same type of servers, and then remediate across the board the vulnerabilities based on these strategies. Honestly, all of them should be implemented in different ways and different varieties as you go and you increase or move up from just doing vulnerability management to actually doing vulnerability remediation. These are things that security can empower IT, DevOps, R&D to look at, and can provide IT, DevOps, and R&D with tools to do it more effectively, both in terms of information, but also in terms of the solutions themselves. With that, I'm gonna move and give Tal Morgenstern the ability to talk a bit about what is the difference between the approaches and what you do now using traditional tools, and how can you progress as you use modern tools. And then we're going to go to the demo. Tal?
Sure. So let's talk about the current challenges of managing a TVM program. First of all is managing a multitude of tools. So you have different types of tools that are able to show you vulnerabilities in the environment, whether it's in the infrastructure, network, code, and open source packages, and so on. And all of those tools do not interact with each other. Each tool can provide different types of reporting, different types of ways to manage the risk, and highlight different types of scoring methodology. And eventually, you need to collect all this data into one source. It also highlights another problem, which is under the asset management issue, which you don't really know what assets are covered by those tools and not covered by those tools, and how effective the security coverage is. So this is one issue. The other is eventually when you do get all the results, there is no one scale to prioritize those vulnerabilities. Each tool has a different methodology. The most common methodology is the CVSS, which doesn't really align with risk prioritization. So CVSS highlights the technical risk of a vulnerability, but doesn't talk about the contextual and specific risks of the environment. After you have all the information about the vulnerabilities, you still need to go through cross-organization to remediate. You need to involve the DevOps teams, the development teams, the IT teams, and go through all of that in order to let them know that there is a vulnerability, and how it would be best to mitigate this vulnerability, and then eventually track this process. So what we see a lot of times is that organizations are struggling with tracking this, or even letting their counterparts know that the vulnerability is available, and then getting the security team alerted on when this vulnerability would be resolved. Another common issue is that teams are thinking that they have solved a certain vulnerability, but eventually the vulnerability was not solved, or was only partially solved on some of the assets. And this happens sometimes because of the asset visibility issue, or sometimes because eventually the underlying baseline was not updated. And this is a common issue with hybrid environments and container environments. Lastly, both the security teams and the ops teams need to track their progress and meet certain SLAs. As Yaniv mentioned, those SLAs sometimes pertain to specific regulation and compliances, and sometimes just to internal best practices of the organization that the departments need to meet. And so with that, I would like to share. Let me send you a quick poll while I go through the way to actually solve this. Yeah. To solve this problems with the current TVM program. So one is that we need a system to have a more holistic asset management. We need the ability to see all the assets that are managed by the enterprise and whether or not they are covered by the different security tools. The other one is we need one method to prioritize the risk, and we need one way that we can prioritize risk according to the specific context of our business needs. As Yaniv mentioned, production environments have a higher value than dev environments, and sensitive servers may have a higher value than other servers, and this should all be as part of the total prioritization when tackling vulnerabilities. Then we will need an effective way to talk and communicate and converse throughout the enterprise and collaborate, working on the same problem, working on the same vulnerabilities in order to solve that. And sometimes those solutions don't come easy. We in Vulcan offer our own remediation intelligence as a way, a database that shows you how it is best to solve different vulnerabilities, whether it needs to apply, the best way is to apply a patch or do a workaround or change any kind of configuration implemented in the product or in other security products. Eventually, we would need a way to track this, all these remediation efforts. So once we have chosen the correct solution and we are on our way with the campaign, we wanted the ability to track the progress of remediation and know that we are on point, meeting our SLA and meeting our goals. Even if we do all of that, as Yaniv mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the numbers of vulnerabilities and critical vulnerabilities are getting higher and higher with every year, and the time to exploit is faster. So it means that we really need to scale the operations in a much more faster way. With that, we think that leveraging automation and orchestration capabilities is the right way to go about. As most of these policies are things that are already embedded in the organization. Although unique for every organization, it's still something that is fairly repetitive for every organization. And this is something that we can leverage the benefits of automation and orchestration in order to facilitate a much more faster response and not spend high resources and pricey resources of security engineers doing mundane tasks. With that, Yaniv, anything to add before we go into the demo?
I would just say that as we see the modern security teams look at the cyber hygiene problem in general, and specifically on vulnerability management, we see a critical shift of accountability and responsibility. Eventually, the modern enterprise, the teams that want to get their results done are not delegating anymore without getting involved. They want to get more involved. They want to provide their counterparts with more tools to resolve vulnerabilities. And their counterparts on the other side are hungry to get this direction in order to get the security tasks done, to go back and focus on the business. This is something that we see more and more, and we believe that as we go further and forward through the journey of all of the enterprise to move to a more flexible, automated and ways of operations across the stack from security to IT, we will see still security teams becoming more responsible and accountable for the hygiene issues of their enterprise and their environments.
Okay, great. So I'll move to the demo. Okay. Yeah. So now I'm sharing the Vulcan platform. You can see the dashboard and the overall risk of this environment. This is a demo environment. We have different security tools connected here, and we are tracking a multitude of different vulnerabilities. We have configured the environment with different business groups. Each have their own specific risk attributes that are aligned to them. So we have the cloud group, the testing group, marketplace, production, portal, and so on. And here you can see that we are tracking all the different activities that have to do with the vulnerabilities and the risks pertaining to them. So we can see all the different vulnerabilities coming from different tools in this environment, and I will show the configuration later. But I want to start with just like the basic use case. We have configured all the tools to send the data into this environment, and we have a great amount of vulnerabilities, which Vulcan has classified only 24 as high-risk vulnerabilities. You can jump into one vulnerability and see why is that the case. So in this case, it's a Tomcat vulnerability. We can see it has different exploits that we have found through threat intelligence resources. And we can see that we are offering different types of fixes that can be deployed to resolve this vulnerability. So you can also read about the different fixes and the difference between them and the different versions that can be applied. And you can send this data as an email, or open a ServiceNow or Jira ticket for someone to fix this. But you can also deploy that automatically. And we offer integration. In this case, Chef and Ansible are both configured. And you can actually deploy this directly to patch this with Ansible. And I would like to show you how this Ansible script would look like. So this is something that was automatically generated by Vulcan with all the packages that needs to be updated with the specific user that would be used to connect to the servers with all the IPs and everything can be done automatically without any kind of hassle. And additionally, it is all tracked in Vulcan. So every action that you take, you can later on show to auditors or monitor yourself for an internal review. And if new assets have been discovered, like in this case, it will all be consolidated into a single pan. And we can see that out of the 99 assets that have been vulnerable for this vulnerability, we only have one that is left, and the rest already have been patched. And this allows us to track the progress of remediation. And everything that I've mentioned now, you can also do via an automated fashion, and we enable you to create playbooks that can use that to automatically patch or automatically open tickets and really use the power of Vulcan automation engine in order to scale your TVM program. With that, I would just like to finish with the asset view and kind of show you all the different tools that are combined in the platform and the power of holistic asset management. So we can see that each tool has a bit of a different view on how they perceive the environment. And eventually, Vulcan is able to correlate all this data to see that there are 1,052 unique hosts in this environment. And with all of that, 67 of them are not being scanned, but they can be seen with the different systems and the different asset management systems in the environment. And you can leverage this to see all the details on the asset, the different vulnerabilities, packages, and other details on the asset, and really understand the problems that are and the vulnerabilities that exist in the environment and in the TVM program. Anything to add?
Maybe just show the reporting.
Oh yeah, definitely. Sorry. So I talked before on the different business groups. So you can see that each different business group has different assets and a different risk scoring, and you can see all of them in one place. And we can just go into one of the groups. So we can see the cloud group actually didn't have a lot of risk last week, and now the risk has increased. Problem being that there was not a lot of vulnerabilities. Probably wasn't scanned last week for some reason. But now we can see the different assets and trending in terms of risk and assets, and monitor the changes in the environment on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So this is a more I would say management type of report. And if you want to get more granular, we have different graphs and reports that are able to monitor through specific SLAs, and all of this is configured in the product, so you can configure your specific SLAs in terms of risk, and monitor the different risk for specific assets or specific vulnerabilities over time. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Tal. I hope this gives you a taste of what the Vulcan platform is capable of doing. I would like to open for a short Q&A session. If everyone has a question, please use the option to raise your hand with the Zoom option. We will give you the ability to speak. Anyone wants to ask a question about what they have seen, about modern remediation strategies, about Vulcan itself? Gil? Yes, please, you have the right to talk. You can speak. Just unmute yourself. Gil, we can't hear you. We could also send it via chat to all of the panelists, and we could answer it through the chat. Meanwhile, while we wait, we will publish another poll for all of you, just to see if you are interested in seeing a demo as we go on. Feel free to answer the poll while Gil is asking his question. Okay, the question that Gil is asking is about APIs, and do we have APIs? It's a great question. What I would like to do is show you a bit about the options to connect connectors to the platform and how we operate around these connectors. Vulcan is powered through a REST API that we use ourselves as we develop. Now, when we get in and we see this specific environment, we see that in this environment, Vulcan is connected to almost 12 different systems, from infrastructures like AWS and GCP, down to deployment tools like Ivanti, configuration management tools like Chef, and of course, tools that provide us with insights about the security posture or business importance. It could be Qualys, Black Duck, JFrog X-Ray, ServiceNow, CMDB, Tenable, White Hat, so on and so forth. There are plenty of other connectors that are being part of the platform, and new connectors are being added every day. With that, we also know that there are factors and things that are sometimes out of our reach. This is why we allow our customers to choose one of two paths. The first path is, of course, to ask us for a dedicated connector, which we are happy to provide. And the second one is to use our REST API to basically either load data or extract data for their will. We see a lot of customers that wants to get Vulcan data and throw it into a system for BI, something like Tableau, Sisense, or other. We provide it through our REST API. There are thorough documentations for it, and we are happy to provide them to our customers. Gil, did that answer your question? You can also write other questions in the chat. Okay, thank you everyone for taking the time to listen up to this webinar. We met our promise and it was 35 minutes. I'm so we're happy to. We're gonna host a couple of more as we go forward. We would love to see you all again. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.